The Fantasy Skirmisher.
Dungeon Saga, the Dwarf King's Quest, is a game for 2 to 5 players, with one player as the Overlord and the rest playing as the heroes. It was published in 2015 by Mantic Games and designed by Jake Thornton. Dungeon Saga was a part of a Kickstarter that included a ton of add-ons, some of which I will cover in future episodes. I did not participate in the Kickstarter, and my purchases include the controversial Adventures Companion, Warlord of Galahir, which is orcs, and the Tyrant of Halpi, which the Overlord is a big dragon. Today I'm just going to be covering the core game only. So let's go ahead and start with the box. It certainly got my attention when I first saw it, and let's face it, it looks really cool, as an ancient book. It's very thematic. However, as a game box, I find it very limiting. The game comes with a lot of stuff: map tiles, minis, cards, tokens, booklets, and I find it difficult to organize everything. So let's take a look. The game comes with lots of stuff, such as tiles. It's got hero and boss cards, the Necromancer Overlord panel. You've got the quick start guide, a rule book, and the quest book. And then, if you just take a look of that hot mess there. So this cardboard piece in the center is really loose. It's just a little insert. And then you've got delicate plastic miniatures combined with more chunkier furniture and hard plastic doors, cards, lots of tokens. So as you can see, it's just not a good box for the type of stuff that's in here and how much stuff is in here. And you can see that the box is bowed a little bit. And mine was a little tweaked. As you can see, it was misaligned during the gluing process. And so my box just closes a little bit askew. So that forces me to have to keep the sleeve on. The miniatures come pre-assembled, which is nice, but you may find some of them to be bent. No worries though, because this is an easy fix by dipping the mini in boiling water, fixing the shape, and then dipping the mini in icy water. It's hard to see the details of the minis that are not painted, as they are kind of a bright, shiny plastic, but they do look good painted. So to me, they look more like they're 25 millimeter or perhaps a 28 millimeter non-heroic scale. So we'll start with the Overlord, which is Mortabris, the Necromancer. And like I said, the bosses, main characters and the heroes have their own cards. And then we have the undead Dwarf King. His name is Grund. And then we have our heroes. So we have Rorden. He is a dwarf fighter. And excuse my paint jobs on these, because this is my early days of painting back in 2015. And I did not use any type of magnifying lenses or anything like that to make sure I got the eyes properly. And I can't even paint that way anymore with the way my eyesight's gone down. All right, so here's Rorden's card. And then we have the human barbarian, Orloff. And as you can see, the heroes are all named characters. Then we have Medriga, an elf ranger, and Danor, the human wizard. A couple of boss monsters warrant their own card, one of which is Hogar, who is a zombie troll shaman. And I need to paint this guy up. And there's his card there. And we'll go over the cards when we talk a little bit more about gameplay. And then Elshara, who is the Banshee. And here's her miniature here. And then we have various types of monsters. We've got zombie trolls, and we've got ghosts. They're carrying a ball and chain. And we've got zombie warriors that come in two flavors. I mean, not zombie warriors, skeleton warriors that come in two flavors. And it comes with a couple of skeleton archers as well. And speaking of zombies in two flavors, here we go. And we also have armored zombies. And dwarf revenants. One of which I have painted. The other one primed from way back. So I need to get cracking and finish this job here. Now we can't overlook the furniture because I almost did. When I opened the box, I realized that most of my doors were missing because I had put them in a separate to paint pile. So there was even more stuff in the box than I showed you. But you can see the furniture looks good. The doors are hard plastic. Everything else is a soft, bendy plastic. But I had no problems painting them up, and they look great on, inside the dungeon. So you've got single doors, double doors. You've got a little book right here, which goes on the lectern, and you've got a couple of tables, weapons rack, and got shields on one side, got weapons on the other. And the chests, they all open up. And that way, if you search a chest, you could just take it off, and that way you know it's been searched. And we've got the well, and then we've got the dwarf crypt. So again, this is a great set, and you don't find furniture in every dungeon crawl. And so this was, like I said, a big draw for me, having some actual furniture. Speaking of the dungeon, the tiles come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. They certainly look better than the bland tiles that are found in the D&D Castle Ravenloft game, but they're not as good as the ones in the Descent 2nd Edition game. The tiles have a grim feel to them, which is really cool, but on some of the artwork, it's looks a little bit murky. But they're all double-sided, as you can see. They got some really nice details. Here we've got a large room. So like I said, overall, I really do like them. But one thing I find that's interesting is, while the tiles have that, dark, gritty feel to them, the player cards and the boss cards, the artwork is kind of cartoony, just it doesn't quite mesh. Also, if you look at the player cards here, one thing that's a little bit of a niggling issue for me is that there's just a lot of wasted space on them. It just seems like these could have been condensed a bit, which would have saved me some table space. But they're very functional overall. Here you track the wounds, and by covering these up, which you'll see in combat, movement, combat dice, and armor. And then you've got feats, which each hero has. You can do once per game. And then you've got abilities, such as this Undead Dwarf King. And then you've got Hogar, the zombie troll shaman, who's got abilities, quite a few, which take up the whole space here. But again, it just seems like overall there's some wasted space, and they could have just better designed these cards and make them a little bit smaller. Now the Necromancer Overlord panel is pretty cool. It lists all the monsters. It shows what their movement is, how many dice they roll in combat, what their armor is, notes such as special abilities if there's any, such as the zombie troll. It's a large model, mob rule, regenerates, and wounds 4, which all those abilities are listed right there on the bottom for easy reference. And then the effects of how many hits the monsters take. So for example, Skeleton Warrior, 1 hit, no effect. 2 hits, it's replaced by a bone pile. Bone piles are helpful for the necromancer because you could regenerate and put a new skeleton where there's a bone pile. And 3 hits, you see destroyed, remove the model. So these Overlord panels are really helpful, and I look forward to getting into the orc one that I have as well as the dragon. There's different types of decks that come with the game, such as item cards, so you get various items, including these energy crystals, which help you power up spells, haste potions, battle potions, breastplates, weapons, jewelry, so on and so forth. And then we have spells. There's 2 types of spells, minor and major, which we'll talk about when we go over the magic system. So you got the spell cards here. For the heroes, they have ability cards, such as Frenzy, Sure Shot, Magister, Magus, and Tough. And then finally we have the Overlord cards, which we'll cover when we cover the Overlord turn. But in addition to command points, which is how many minions or monsters the necromancer could activate each turn, he also has a deck of cards of which he could play 1. And so it could give extra commands, as you see here. You could interrupt the hero's turn. There's double commands. Curse them all. Graves of our ancestors, raise one dead. So this also serves as a timer. When the card deck runs out, that's for the scenarios, that's when the game ends. Or one of the conditions, I should say. So the heroes are always under a timer. The game also comes with a couple of range markers for short, long range, which you use for shooting and for spells. And then a variety of markers. For example, here's the bone piles I had mentioned, where if you kill a skeleton, it could be destroyed into a pile of bones, but maybe used later to reanimate. Just a variety of little tokens here, including little puzzle pieces for one of the scenarios. I think that's the one involving the Banshee. And you've got different types of locks, magical and other ones, where you have to use force to open, say, doors or chests. And here's got wound tokens, some others, and then finally we've got the dice. And so that is the contents of the game. So let's take a look at the gameplay. Dungeon Saga has 2 introductory scenarios and 8 regular scenarios that link to form a campaign. The story draws off Mantic's well-established Kings of War world building, and the story in this game is quite good. The backstories for the characters are included as well, which is a nice touch. So what I have set up here is Adventure 1, which links up the 2 introductory scenarios. Introductory scenarios 1 and 2, Journey from the East and Journey from the West, has 2 heroes each, and then they meet up for that common goal, which is to get through this door here. The sequence of play consists of the hero turn, where each hero can activate and move and perform an action, or they could perform a heroic feat. After all the heroes have moved or performed their actions, then it is the Overlord's turn. The Overlord has a set number of commands as determined by each adventurer that he can use to activate minions that are on the board. Also, in addition to the commands, the Overlord has a hand of Overlord cards, and the Overlord can play 1 card per turn, which may give him extra commands or set some type of event into place. And then after that, it is the end of turn phase, where the Overlord draws another card, which he has no hand limit. And any spells that were used and rotated move 90 degrees, and if they're face back up, they are ready for use again in the next turn. But more on spellcasting later. So let's go over some examples of play, starting with a move. Before I continue, I just want to share Adventure 1 without giving any spoilers. So Adventure 1 is well met, so they meet up for the first time, and it's got the storyline right here that the Overlord reads, and then it's got the special instructions. So this is what the heroes are equipped with. And in this case, it's just Danor the Human Wizard, who has 3 Power 1 energy crystals and the available spells to him. And then the Overlord has 12 command cards. So again, the command cards serve as a timer. So if he has none to draw, game is over. And also 3 commands per turn. That is basically his activations for the minions on the dungeon tiles. And then there's limits to how many times he could raise the dead, which is, for skeleton warriors, it's a max of 4. Skeleton archers, it's a max of 2. So for him to raise the dead right now, I would have to kill some skeletons. And then, of course, what's very important is the victory conditions, right? So for the heroes, if they open the final door marked X, they win the game. Otherwise, the Overlord wins. And he could also win by crippling one of the heroes, meaning bringing them to 0 health on the health track. And like I said, he wins if the time runs out based on the cards. So what they need to do is they just need to move down the map, open this door here. Of course, I think it'd be helpful to open that treasure chest as well. Then there's another room. They need to get through the other room to be able to win the game. Dungeon Saga is a tactical dungeon crawl, and like Space Hulk, a model spacing is important. The 3 squares behind the model is its rear arc. And if you're attacked in the rear arc, you could incur a penalty for that. Models can move up to their movement allowance, and I'm going to activate Rorden first, who has a movement allowance of 6, and he's going to try to take out this skeleton archer here. So he's going to move 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll stop there right now. Models can move diagonally, but not if the 2 orthogonal squares are blocked. So if there was furniture or another model right there, he would not be able to make that move. And models could only move out of a enemy square by doing something called breaking away, which I'll cover later. Breaking away is basically the other model gets a free strike against you, which is, basically it's a fight. And then models can change their facing at any time. So I'm going to use my last move to move and change facing here. And so that way, with his back up against the wall, every square is in his front arc. And so now we're going to move on to a combat example. Fighting, as it's called in Dungeon Saga, is simple, it's interesting, and is what, in my opinion, makes it such a good game. Each model rolls dice equal to their combat skill less any modifiers. So in this case, a Rorden rolls 4 dice, and the skeleton warrior would roll 2 dice. Rolls that the attacker make that are less than or equal to the defender's armor value is discarded. Those are called feeble attacks. Players then compare their dice side by side from high to low, and dice which rolled a number that is higher hits. So shooting works in the same way, except that the attacker must first check range, use a range ruler, and line of sight, which we will cover. So the modifiers are -1 die if the model's injured, and the model is injured if all the white health spaces are taken up and there's only red left. So that is what's considered being injured. And as you could see, our wizard here, takes 1 wound, and then he's injured and rolls 1 less die. Now, the other modifiers is -1 die if the model is outnumbered, -1 die if you are attacking the model from its rear arc, as I mentioned before. And then we'll cover shooters here just in a little bit, but it's -1 die if there's furniture within the line of sight that's not adjacent to the shooter. Now let's roll some dice for combat. All right, well, looks like that skeleton is dead. So remove any feeble attacks. There are none. If I rolled a 1 or a 2, I would have removed the dice, but did not do that. Then we put them in order here, from highest to lowest. And as you can see, the 6 beats the 2, so it's 1 hit. The 4 beats the 1, it's another hit. And we've got 2 more hits because it's greater than the armor, so 4 hits total. So you could see here for the skeleton warrior, if it was one hit, it would have been no effect. If it was 2 hits, the target or the skeleton is boned, and you replace the model with a pile of bones counter. And then perhaps it could resurrect again. But in this case, we got 4 hits, it is destroyed, and we remove the model. So that skeleton archer over there is gone, pulverized. All right, I moved Orloff, who is also facing the wall. That way every square is in his front arc, because he's going to get attacked by these skeletons here. And then I moved Madriga, the elf archer, and she is going to shoot at this skeleton warrior. Madriga shoots at the skeleton warrior. The only difference between fighting, or melee as it is, and shooting is that first you need to determine range and line of sight. So as you can see here, she has long range weapon here, and this is the long range ruler, which is way more than enough to shoot at the skeleton, and there's nothing blocking line of sight. So again, she is going to roll for shooting dice, 4 dice to the skeleton's 2. Now, I just want to point out as far as combat that if because of modifiers that the fight dice ever go less than 2, that's not allowed. You always have a minimum of 2 fight dice, and you always have a minimum of 1 armor. So just want to point that out. All right, so we roll the dice, and the skeleton, well, we've got skeleton's armor is 2, so we've got 3 feeble dice. Those go away, and that leaves us with a 5, and the skeleton's is greater, the 6 greater than the 5, so no hit. So Madriga in her rush missed the skeleton warrior. So now we're going to go ahead and move the wizard. So Danor has moved, and he is going to cast a major spell called Burn on that skeleton. So Burn does not require line of sight, as indicated by the symbol there, crosses out the eyeball. It is a short-range major pyromancy spell. Major is that it takes longer for it to recharge. So the target suffers 4 dice magical attack. There's no line of sight required, as per that symbol there. And it may even be used when in the front arc of an enemy. And also recharging. So when this spell recharges, it's rotated 180 degrees, so therefore it takes 2 turns to be available again. All right, so let's try to get this skeleton. So like I said, magic attacks work the same way as fighting and shooting. So the skeleton warrior is going to roll his 2 combat dice, and the spell is a 4 dice attack. One thing that I could do, I have 3 Power 1 energy crystals. And you can see that it's a 1-use item. The hero rolls 1 additional dice when casting a spell that uses dice. The crystal may also be used to recharge a spell, rotating it 90 degrees clockwise, or to cast a spell of any level higher than the caster's own. Only 1 crystal may be used per spell per turn. But I've only got 3, and things are going to get tough later on in the scenario, so I don't feel like I need to use it. So we're going to go ahead and roll the dice and see what happens. All right, so I rolled a 2 here, so that's a feeble attack. And then I've rolled a 4, a 6, 4, and 3. He rolled a 5 and a 4, so this is a good example here. So this attack goes through. This attack does not, because it's tied. And this attack goes through, because there's no dice left for the skeleton. So we've got 2 hits. So with 2 hits, the skeleton is boned. So I replaced the model with a bone pile. So later on, a skeleton may be resurrected there. And then after you use the spell, It's a major spell, so it's turned 180 degrees. It is now the Overlord turn, and as I mentioned, I have 3 command points for this adventure. And I could use those command points to activate a model, to move and or perform an action, or I can raise the dead with one. And then of course I could play one of these cards in my hand. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to raise the dead. I'm going to activate my skeleton. And I think I am going to place it right here. So one thing I'm going to point out, if I had placed it, say, right here next to my barbarian would get a free strike because as it's assembling, he'd have time to take a whack at it. So I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to place it right here, and then I remove the token. Now I've got the skeleton archer. I think I should use a second command point to raise another skeleton. And I am going to place it right by the door here. So I've got one skeleton archer on either side of the treasure chest protecting the doors. I don't want to place it too close to the heroes because they'll be able to take it out when it's their next turn. Now that leaves me with 1 command left, and I think I need to use that to attack the barbarian here. So barbarian is going to roll, how many dice does he get? He gets 5 dice. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. 1, 2, 3. I think it's best to use skeletons as speed bumps just to slow them, them being the heroes, down. Because, just to run down the clock, so to speak. But I've already committed to it, so I'm going to roll the dice. And let's see. Got 5, and the armor is 2, so 1 feeble attack, so 1 hit, but there's the 6 there, as you can see, so there's no hits. Now let's just say that the attack went through, that Orloff rolled very poorly, and the skeleton got, let's just say, 2 hits. Doesn't matter how many hits that the enemy gets, the hero would only take 1 hit point, meaning, putting the token on the player aid there. So you could get 1 hit or 3 hits. It's still just 1 wound for the hero. Now that was my 3 commands, but I could play a card here. And I think what I'm going to do, Curse them all is not going to work. This puts a curse on the heroes this turn, which they get 1 armor. And I really don't have any attacks left. I'll save my double commands for a future turn. So I'm going to use 1 extra command. I'm going to play that. I'll just discard it up here. So with my 1 extra command, what am I going to do? I think the skeleton is going to move 1, 2, 3. And it's got 4. So they're going to have to just fight their way down the hall full of skeletons. At least that's my plan. And that is the Overlord turn. So now there's just a couple more things before I wrap up some final thoughts. And that is how to open up doors and also treasure chests. Because there's 2 types of locks, as mentioned, arcane, and then just having to use physical strength to be able to break a door open. However, end activities, so I rotate the 1 spell that was used 90 degrees, and I drew another card, which was 1 extra command again. Now let's pretend we played through the adventure here, and we got to the point that we're in the room adjacent to the door we need to open. And we killed a lot of skeletons in the process and had to battle our way through. And they've got, of course, got resurrected here. and we've taken a few wounds, but we're close to our objective here. Before I have Orloff open the door, I want to make sure that this chest is open so we could grab the items in it. So the chest is protected by something called a ward. So this is can only be opened using magic, and when a ward is reduced to 0, then the chest or the door, whatever it's protecting, opens up. So how do we reduce this to 0? Well, our spellcaster has a break ward card. So Danar has this spell which says a single magical ward in an adjacent square is reduced in strength by 1. When the ward's strength reaches 0, it is broken. So we are going to, as an action, play this spell, and the ward is reduced to 0 and broken. The chest opens up, and we've got 2 items which we're going to collect. We have spider silk armor, which is elf-only armor. That's great. And we have a 1-use healing potion. So useful items. So now we're going to have Orloff open the door here, but it is a mundane lock. And mundane locks can only be opened up by force. And by force meaning we have to do a fight action. So Orloff has 5 dice, and this locked door has a defense of 3 and has 3 fight dice that it uses. So we're going to roll the dice here, and it only takes 1 success to open. And clearly see that here because the highest door lock is 4. We got a 5, so the door is removed. And then when the door is removed, the other room is revealed. And then of course, the Overlord populates that room, and now we've got another situation in our hands because we're surrounded by skeletons, and God knows whatever is in here. I'm going to leave that for you guys to discover if you choose to get this game or play with a friend. And then when you get through that room, you need to get out the other door to move on to Adventure 2. Dungeon Saga is an underrated dungeon crawl in my opinion. It's a very solid game, it's a lot of fun to play, and it is very tactical in nature. Will it meet everyone's needs? Of course not. I'm still looking for the perfect dungeon crawl, and this is not it. But it is a really fun game with lots of expansions and hopefully potential with the Adventurer's Companion, which I'm going to review here in the near future. So this is the scenario, the first one that I played with 4 friends who each played a hero, and I was the Overlord. And I just want to say it was a very balanced, tense game. They were under pressure to meet the victory conditions and not get one of them killed or crippled, as they say in the game. And I was able to use the skeletons as speed bumps, and so that's where these came in really handy here, the bone piles, where I could resurrect the skeletons. And I was able to resurrect archers behind them, which harassed them and shot at them from behind. And so really put a lot of pressure on my friends who were playing the heroes. And at the very end of the game, and it came down to the wire, they won, which they all gave a big huzzah. And I was happy for them. I had a great time playing the Overlord and trying to foil their plans. So I felt a little bit like a DM, in that regard. The first 2 introductory scenarios I played solitaire, and I had fun playing at solitaire, just the core game. So with the Overlord player, what I did is with my hand, I just took my hand of 3 cards, mixed them up, and then chose one. And in addition to the commands, that is what I played. It's not optimal, but I still had a great time playing it. So what does this offer, and what does it not? Like I said, this is a tactical game. It provides a linear story that's well written, so it is thematic. But if you're seeking, an exploration game, by searching rooms, things like that, it's not quite it. It does have exploration in the sense that if you hit a door, you don't know it's on the other side of it until you open it, and that's when the Overlord player sets up that next section of the dungeon. But if you walk into a room, it's not like you could take an action to search it to see if you find anything, whether it's a trap, a monster, or loot. It's not that kind of game. And it doesn't have leveling up in the sense that a lot of people like, as far as adding to your stats or your abilities. Like I said earlier, that here is your hero, and at some point in the campaign, you'll be able to turn the card over to a legendary version, which gives more abilities and feats. One thing I really didn't cover in this review is the characters' feats, the hero's feats, as well as the boss monsters, which were not covered, because they add a lot of flavor and personality to the adventures that they're in, such as the Banshee or the zombie troll shaman. Another thing that this does not have is random encounters, where you roll to see if there's a wandering monster or something like that. And it doesn't provide a lot of loot. We had the one treasure chest, which gave us a couple of items, and those items, are listed as what you start with in the next adventure. So it's very scripted in that sense. But again, this is a great game for what it is. It does have replayability in the expansions that it offers, and I plan to, kind of really dive into the Adventures Companion because it is a bit controversial, that expansion, just to see what it offers as far as solitaire play, additional rules, and cooperative play. So with that said, I'm going to sign off, and thank you for watching the Fantasy Skirmisher. Bye-bye.